was it. Well, I want to start off this morning with a story with y'all, because this sermon, I'm going to try and get through it as quickly as I can, but I think this is a really, really important, powerful story that Jesus tells us, all right? Because how many of us have run into conflict in our lives before? How many of us have ever argued with somebody? How many people have ever let someone down or felt let down by someone? I think that this story speaks to that. And I can remember being a little kid and hearing my parents argue. Anybody remember back in their minds when they first heard their parents have a serious argument? And I can remember being afraid because one of my friends at school, his parents had gotten divorced. And I could remember thinking that because my parents were arguing, they were going to get divorced. My mom asked me why I was crying. She found me and I told her that I heard them fighting and that I was afraid that they would get divorced. And my mom gave me a hug and said, first off, you've never heard us actually fight. And you don't need to be afraid when we argue because that means that we care enough to struggle and make the effort to work things out. She said something that I'll never forget. She said, when we stop arguing, when we stop talking to one another, that's when you need to work. My parents celebrated their 51st wedding anniversary this summer, and they still love and care about each other enough that I still get to occasionally hear them argue with one another. Who are some people in your life that you care enough about to disagree with them, to challenge them, to confront them, to argue with them? Who are some people in your life? Kids. Yeah, your kids. And does that ever stop? I see reach up. Yeah, no, I mean, my parents still will tell me when they think that something I'm doing is wrong or could be better or whatnot.
My dad.
So sometimes you argue with your parents because you care about them. Yeah, and there have been things where I've said, and my dad is my absolute hero, and man, it takes something deep inside to say, Dad, I think you're wrong on that one. And you need to think about it, And that's been a really touchy experience. Who else do you ever? Siblings. So, yeah, siblings. We care enough about our family members to sometimes have dialogue, discussion, maybe even energetic discussion. Friends. Yeah, I mean, how many of us have ever had to have a sit-down, honest-to-God talk with a good friend of ours? Yeah. Anybody else? There's nobody in this world that could have a job and be wrong as much as the weather person. I bring this up, all right? I bring up this idea of conflict, of disagreement, of all this, because the next few weeks, our gospel lessons will be Jesus teaching and telling stories about conflict, about forgiveness, about reconciliation. And I think we know all too well about arguments, about fights and disagreements, and the challenges and the pain and the energy that we expend in these conflicts. What perhaps is surprising is to whom this teaching that Jesus gives us is addressed. All right? Who is Jesus talking to about handling conflict this morning? And you're allowed to look in your He's talking to his disciples, right? He says, if another member of the church sins against you. From the very beginning, Jesus knows that there will be conflicts, arguments, and fights between his beloved disciples. And sometimes I hear people tell me about a fight that's unfolding in a church. Another church, of course, because we never fight in here. But, they'll say, Pastor, they say, Can you believe that Christians are behaving like that? Well, yeah, because the church is full of sinners. Like all of you, like me. So of course we're going to be having conflict and broken relationships. Jesus is under no illusions about the arguments and challenges inherent in all human relationships. What is striking to me is how the church is called to be different and unique in how they handle sin, broken relationships, and forgiveness. Perhaps the thing that sticks out to me the most about this teaching is the sheer amount of work and effort that goes into being reconciled and to forgiving one another. Nowhere does Jesus imply that forgiveness will just magically take over our hearts, right? The process of restoring relationships will require physical and emotional energy. Jesus does talk about prayer, but it's not some magic wand that you wave over the situation to suddenly make it all better. So I want to dive into this process that Jesus gives us for handling sin and conflict between members of his church. So what's first? What's the very first thing we're supposed to do? Talk to them directly. Alone. All right. How many fights have we seen started because instead of talking to the person directly, I talk to Joe about so-and-so? All the time. How many of us have hurt someone that we dearly love and care about and didn't even realize that we had hurt them? So the process begins by talking directly to the person who you have a problem with. Will this be easy? No, not at all. And rarely is the path of discipleship and life in a community easy. How many of us have mastered this courage only to have the person we feel aggrieved by still not recognize the sin and pain that they've caused? So Jesus gives us a second step, right? We might go to somebody and say, I feel hurt that you did what to me? And they might say, so? Yeah? All right, so what's the second step? Take somebody with you. Take one or two others with you to see the person. And at first, I thought this sounded like ganging up. All right? And I didn't know how good of an idea that was. But I wonder if it's actually a protection for both sides in the disagreement. All right, I want to give you a story here. So let's pretend for a second that I'm mad at Brian. All right? And I know that sounds like an impossible thing because he's such a nice guy. But I'm mad at Brian, and I think he's wrong. I think he's being a jerk. And so I go to Pastor Herb, and I go to Chuck, our president of our council, and tell them, this is what I feel like Brian has done, and will you go with me to confront him? And they say, Jim, you know what? I don't think that Brian's done anything wrong. We're not going with you. Do you think this might make me rethink my own feelings and my own reactions to the situation? So I think that's actually a protection to kind of make it seem like if nobody will go with you on this one, you might want to look at yourself. On the other hand, if they did go with me, might Pastor Herb's years of wisdom and counsel calm both sides of the argument? Might Chuck's position and leadership impress on all the severity of the situation? And yet this still might not work, right? So Jesus gives us a third step. What's next? The whole church goes, all right? So 100 people show up on your lawn. All right? And again, I think this serves as a check and balance to make sure that the complaint and sin is real and valid. It also demonstrates the seriousness that the community takes about sin and about broken relationship. What this means is that this church cares enough that it wants people to have healed relationships. People are important to God, and people are important to the church. The church will stand firmly behind the truth that sin must stop? How might the presence of the whole community, again, help calm the emotions and restore a right relationship? Might the collective wisdom prevent violence and find a just solution to the problem? And still, we know that sometimes even the best intentions and sheer numbers aren't enough to bring about resolution. What then? When is enough enough? After 3 tries, does this mean that I get to finally kick him out of St. Peter's, right? No? This is where it gets a little interesting. Because at first glance, it looks like 3 strikes and you're out. And there are times that we should say to someone, your behaviors are not welcome here. And yet, the examples of stubborn sin are curiously specific. Let's look at what Jesus says. And if the offender refuses to listen even to the church, let such a one be to you as a Gentile and a tax collector. How did Jesus treat Gentiles and tax collectors? With unrelenting pursuit of grace and forgiveness. Although Jesus didn't say, keep doing what you're doing, and that's fine, we'll take you as you are. He kept going after him, saying, turn from your ways. Stop being, oppressing your people, and come back to us. There is nothing that you can do or say to ever make Jesus stop loving you. This is the gospel. This is the good news of Jesus Christ. However, this doesn't mean that Jesus doesn't care or tolerates the pain or brokenness we inflict on one another. The church is called to live out Jesus' example of constantly seeking to tell us to turn from our path of sin and reach out to restore us to our place in the body of Christ as fully forgiven sinners. As we begin our year in school, at work, in life, we are reminded again of the uniqueness and the strangeness of the community that we are called to be together. We are called to this by our baptisms, by our Lord Jesus Christ. Anyone can be in relationship and declare their love and friendship for one another when everything is good, right, just, and easy, right? I always talk to people when I do marriage counseling. They have a question on my marriage inventory that says, there is nothing that this person could do to ever make me question my love for them. And most of the newlyweds say, I absolutely agree with that statement. And I say to you, they will do things that will make you question your love for them. The Christian church is challenged to love and pursue reconciliation despite real pain, real problems, and real conflicts. How might this witness and pursuit of relationship be a powerful witness to a world where people and relationships are treated as expendable and disposable? The standard practice in too many churches, we know it. How many of you have seen this? One person disagrees with one person, and what happens? One of them leaves. Or a whole group leaves. Let's be different. Let's be unique. Let's look to scriptures like Matthew 18 when dealing with the sin and brokenness that we will encounter amongst this church family that we know and love. It is not a question of if, but a question of when. This will be hard. And yet, what would be the power of a place where neither God nor humans give up on a person or a relationship? I invite us all to come and worship at St. Peter's, where sin is not tolerated, but always forgiven. Thanks be to God, and amen.